In the summer of 1954, as the golden leaves of Princeton whispered the first secrets of autumn, a man walked slowly through the silent halls of the Institute for Advanced Study. His unruly white hair shimmered like strands of silver light, and his deep eyes carried the weight of one who had unraveled the mysteries of the cosmos, only to discover that the greatest enigmas resided not in distant stars, but in the very essence of human existence. Albert Einstein, the architect of relativity, the man who had bent space and time with his equations, prepared to reveal something he had kept secret for decades, a truth that transcended all known physics and touched the core of the immortal soul. An analog tape recorder sat on the mahogany desk in his private office, a simple device that would soon capture words capable of shaking the foundations of materialistic science. Einstein had decided the time had come to share his most intimate experiences, those he had never dared mention in his academic lectures or correspondence with Niels Bohr. At 75, his health weakened by an aortic aneurysm that pulsed. Like a time bomb in his chest, he felt the nearness of a transition that was not only biological, but cosmic. For the past few months, inexplicable signs had begun to manifest around him, lights dancing without apparent source, whispers echoing, in tongues his mind recognized but had never learned, and visions of familiar faces that had departed long before him. The most celebrated physicist of the 20th century had arrived at a disturbing and wonderful conclusion. Consciousness was not a mere product of the brain, but a fundamental force of the universe, as primordial as gravity or electromagnetism. His discoveries about the relativity of time and space had been merely a prelude to a far deeper revelation, that death was simply an illusion of perspective, a dimensional transition that modern science refused to accept. Einstein pressed the record button with trembling fingers, not from nervousness but from the magnitude of what he was about to reveal. His voice, still marked by the German accent he never abandoned, began to flow like an ancestral river carrying age-old secrets. He spoke of the first signs he had perceived in his youth while working at the patent office in Bern. During his long nights poring over the equations that would revolutionize physics, Einstein had begun to experience altered states of consciousness in which he could literally feel the curvature of space-time. It wasn't an intellectual understanding, but a visceral perception, as if his soul could navigate the hidden dimensions that his formulas only described. In these transcendental experiences, he began to glimpse something that orthodox science would consider impossible: the existence of planes of reality, where consciousness continued to exist after the dissolution of the physical body. The first unequivocal manifestation of these phenomena occurred in 1915, a few months after the death of his father, Hermann Einstein. The old merchant, who had supported his son's scientific dreams even without fully understanding them, appeared to Albert in an experience that transcended any rational explanation. It was not a dream or a hallucination, but a real encounter in a dimension parallel to our physical reality. Hermann emerged as a luminous presence in Albert's office, radiating a profound peace and communicating through a language that went beyond words, a direct transmission of consciousness to consciousness. The deceased father explained that death was simply a change in vibrational frequency, like a radio tuning into a different station, and that true love created eternal bridges between dimensions. Einstein revealed on the recording that this experience led him to re-examine his equations from a completely new perspective. The famous formula EMC2 described not only the conversion between mass and energy, but also the transformation of consciousness between different states of existence. The energy released when matter dissolved did not disappear into nothingness. It transmuted into subtler forms of reality, carrying with it all the memories, emotions, and experiences accumulated during physical life. Consciousness, Einstein realized, was an even more fundamental form of energy than light, capable of traversing not only space, but also the dimensional barriers separating the visible and invisible worlds. Over the following years, the spiritual manifestations intensified. Einstein described how his deceased mother, Pauline, began to visit him during moments of profound scientific contemplation. She always appeared when he was grappling with particularly complex mathematical problems, offering insights that seemed to come from a source of knowledge far beyond earthly understanding. Pauline, who in life had been a simple woman devoted to her family, demonstrated in the spiritual dimension a cosmic wisdom that made Einstein question everything he thought he knew about the nature of intelligence and the evolution of the soul. The physicist reported that these experiences led him to develop a secret theory he never dared publish: the theory of multidimensional consciousness. According to this revolutionary hypothesis, each human being existed simultaneously in multiple dimensions, our perception being limited by the structure of the physical brain, which functioned as a reality-reducing filter. Death was not the end of existence, but simply the removal of this filter, allowing consciousness to access the totality of its multidimensional nature. What we called the afterlife was, in fact, full life, a state of existence where all temporal and spatial limitations dissolved, revealing the true eternity that had always been present but hidden by the illusion of temporal linearity. Einstein confessed that these revelations had made him profoundly lonely within the scientific community. His colleagues admired his mathematical genius, but he knew they couldn't comprehend the mystical dimensions of his discoveries. Quantum physics itself, with its paradoxes and uncertainties, was merely a shy glimpse into a far vaster and interconnected reality he had begun to explore. Heisenberg's uncertainty principle, quantum entanglement, and wave function collapse were phenomena. That made perfect sense when understood from the perspective of consciousness as a fundamental creative force. In the recording, his voice took on an even more intimate tone as he began to discuss the signs that preceded major spiritual transitions. He had noticed that, before the deaths of those close to him, subtle manifestations began to occur: photographs inexplicably falling from shelves, clocks stopping at significant times, familiar scents appearing out of nowhere, and a peculiar sensation of an unseen presence hanging in the air like silent music. He interpreted these phenomena as evidence that consciousness transcended the limitations of linear time, allowing transitioning souls to communicate with the living through synchronicities and manifestations on the physical plane. The most extraordinary moment of revelation came when he described his own near-death experience in 1948 during surgery to repair an aortic aneurysm. During the critical minutes when his heart stopped beating, his consciousness was catapulted into a dimension of reality that defied all description. He found himself in an infinite space, filled with a golden light pulsing with its own life, a luminosity that not only illuminated, but was pure, crystallized consciousness. In this timeless realm, he encountered an assembly of luminous beings whom he instantly recognized as great thinkers and scientists who had passed before him: Newton, Galileo, Kepler, and many others whose names history had forgotten, but whose contributions to the evolution of human consciousness shone like stars in this higher dimension. These beings did not communicate through words, but through direct transmissions of pure knowledge. He instantly understood truths that decades of study had failed to reveal. The structure of the universe unfolded before his perception like an infinitely complex cosmic origami, where each fold represented a different dimension of existence. He saw how individual consciousness was simultaneously unique and universal, like a drop of water maintaining its own identity while participating. In the infinite ocean, the illusion of separation completely dissolved, revealing a web of connections that linked all beings, all planets, all galaxies, in a symphony of conscious existence. In this transcendental dimension, time did not flow linearly, but expanded in all directions like a cosmic rose unfolding. He could simultaneously experience his past, present, and future, understanding how every moment of his life had been perfectly orchestrated to lead him to this supreme revelation. His scientific discoveries, his personal struggles, his joys and sorrows, all were part of a larger plan, a cosmic curriculum designed to awaken his consciousness to truths that transcended science itself. The most moving encounter in this experience was with his first wife, Mileva Maric, who had died a few years earlier. Mileva appeared radiating a soft light, free from all the bitterness and resentments that had marked the final years of their earthly marriage. She smiled at him with a pure, crystalline love, and he understood that all the difficulties of their relationship had simply been necessary lessons for the growth of both their souls. Mileva conveyed to him the understanding that true love was eternal and indestructible, but that its expression on the physical plane was often distorted by the limitations of human personality. On the spiritual plane, where souls existed in their original purity, all relationships found their perfect resolution. He reported that, during this out-of-body experience, he also received visions of humanity's future. He saw that materialistic science would eventually reach a dead end, where its own discoveries would force researchers to recognize the primacy of consciousness over matter. Quantum physics was only the first step in this paradigm shift that would transform not only our understanding of the universe, but our very nature as spiritual beings having a temporary human experience. He glimpsed a golden age where science and spirituality would reunify, revealing that they had never really been separate. Only our limited perception had created this illusion of division. When his consciousness returned to his physical body on the operating table, he felt like an explorer who had visited infinite continents, only to be forced back to a small island. The physical world suddenly seemed narrow and claustrophobic compared to the limitless dimensions he had experienced. For weeks after the surgery, he struggled to integrate these revelations into his daily life, knowing that sharing them publicly could destroy his scientific reputation. The academic community was not prepared to accept that their greatest genius had transcended the limits of materialistic physics to explore realms that orthodox science considered fanciful. In the recording, he revealed that the last years of his life had been dedicated not only to the pursuit of a unified field theory, but to a far deeper integration, the unification between science and spirituality, between rational mind and intuitive wisdom. He realized that his most elegant equations emerged not from pure logical reasoning, but from states of expanded consciousness where he could literally feel the mathematical harmony of the cosmos. Intuition was, in fact, a form of extrasensory perception that connected the individual mind to the universal intelligence that permeated all creation. Spiritual manifestations continued to intensify as he aged. He described visits from his great friend Michel Besso, who had died a few weeks before the recording. Besso appeared regularly in his office, especially during quiet afternoons when he worked on his final equations. The deceased friend not only offered spiritual companionship, but also mathematical insights that seemed to come from a much wider dimensional perspective. Besso explained that, on the spiritual plane, mathematics wasn't a tool for describing the universe, it was the very language through which cosmic consciousness expressed itself. Einstein confessed these experiences had profoundly changed him. The man who once declared that God didn't play dice with the universe had arrived at a far more nuanced understanding of the divine. God wasn't an anthropomorphic entity sitting on a celestial throne, but rather the infinite consciousness itself, from which all individual consciousnesses emerged like waves in an eternal ocean. Each human being carried within them a spark of this universal divinity, a holographic fraction containing the potential of all creation. Spiritual evolution was simply the gradual process of awakening to this inner divine nature. The physicist revealed he'd begun developing secret meditative practices that allowed him to access these higher dimensions at will. During his solitary walks through the Princeton woods, he entered states of consciousness where he could perceive the living presence of nature, not merely as an ecological system, but as a manifestation of cosmic intelligence. Every tree, every flower, every bird participated in a symphony of consciousness that extended from the smallest subatomic particles to the largest galaxies. The separation between observer and observed dissolved, revealing a fundamental unity that quantum physics had only begun to glimpse. Einstein shared his theories on the different levels of existence after death. According to his spiritual investigations, consciousness didn't simply continue after the death of the body. It expanded through multiple dimensions of reality, each offering specific opportunities for growth and evolution. The first level was a transitional dimension, where newly disincarnate souls processed their earthly experiences and prepared for more expansive journeys. Higher levels included realms of pure knowledge where humanity's great discoveries were generated dimensions of unconditional love, where spiritual healing occurred, and spheres of cosmic creativity, where new realities were constantly generated through the power of focused consciousness. The recording also revealed his views on reincarnation, a concept Einstein had initially dismissed as superstition, but had come to accept as a scientific truth. Consciousness, being pure energy, couldn't be destroyed, only transformed. Physical, death was followed by periods of existence in spiritual dimensions, but eventually, many souls chose to return to the physical plane to continue their evolution through new bodily experiences. Each life was like a semester in a cosmic university, offering specific lessons that contributed to the soul's gradual development toward spiritual perfection. Einstein described with particular emotion his communications with deceased scientists who continued their research on the spiritual plane. Max Planck had become a spiritual guide for Einstein, explaining how scientific discoveries were actually partial revelations of eternal truths that existed in cosmic consciousness. Each scientific breakthrough was a moment when the human mind temporarily aligned with these universal patterns of knowledge. Great scientists didn't invent theories. They discovered them in dimensions where all truths already existed in complete form. In this cosmic center, he encountered a presence of love so vast and unconditional that all the unexpressed tears of decades of intellectual solitude finally flowed freely. This presence, which he didn't dare name but recognized as the source of all existence, embraced him with infinite tenderness, showing him the secret purpose of his entire scientific and spiritual journey. His discoveries on relativity weren't merely intellectual advancements, but preparations for this final revelation, that everything in the universe was relative except love and consciousness, which were eternal absolutes. The famous equation EMC2 revealed its deepest dimension. It didn't just describe the conversion between matter and energy, but the transformation of consciousness through love, the speed of light squared, symbolizing the infinite acceleration that love imprinted on spiritual evolution. In this culminating experience, he understood that his earthly mission was nearing completion. He had been chosen to serve as a bridge between two paradigms, the materialistic one that had dominated the past centuries, and the spiritual scientific one that would emerge in future generations. His seemingly materialistic discoveries had actually planted seeds of a spiritual revolution that would completely transform human understanding of the nature of reality. Quantum physics, relativity, and the theories yet to come would inevitably converge into a grand synthesis where science and spirituality would reveal themselves as complementary aspects of a single cosmic truth. He concluded his forbidden recording with a reflection that seemed to come not only from his brilliant mind, but from his fully awakened soul. He spoke of how death was, in fact, the birth of the soul into its true homeland. The physical body was like a cocoon protecting consciousness during its earthly developmental stage. But a time came when that cocoon needed to open to allow the spiritual butterfly to take flight into vaster dimensions. The afterlife wasn't a comforting speculation, but the natural continuation of a journey that had begun long before physical birth and would continue far beyond bodily dissolution. His voice, now imbued with a profound serenity that transcended any fear of death, delivered a final message that would echo through the decades. Humanity was on the verge of an unprecedented transformation, where the artificial boundaries between science and spirituality would vanish forever. New generations of scientists would no longer be content to study only the material universe. They would explore the infinite dimensions of consciousness, revealing that each human being was simultaneously a scientist and a mystic, an explorer of both the outer cosmos and the inner infinity. When he finally switched off the recorder on that golden afternoon of 1954, he knew he had deposited on the magnetic tapes a treasure that would forever transform human understanding of the nature of existence. He also knew the world wasn't yet ready for these revelations, but trusted that the time would come when courageous souls would discover his hidden words and allow them to blossom in humanity's collective consciousness. The truth about the immortality of the soul and the continuity of consciousness beyond death could not remain hidden forever. Like light itself, it would find a way to illuminate the darkness of ignorance and awaken humanity to its true cosmic and eternal nature. A few weeks after this secret recording, he would make his own transition to the higher dimensions he had explored in life, leaving behind not only a revolutionary scientific legacy, but also a spiritual testament that would patiently await the right moment to emerge from the shadows and reveal to humanity that death was merely an illusion, and that love and consciousness were the only truly eternal realities of the infinite universe.